and welcome everybody to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. It's series 13, session 4. Can't believe it. My name's Sue Macdonald, and I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery festivals and for the Maternity and Midwifery Hour. And it's my pleasure to be joined by Kathryn Gutteridge this evening, who is joining me, and she's our lovely speaker. And because we always do this to our speakers, we ask them to share a little moment of the week just to get us onto maybe a professional moment or maybe an unprofessional moment, whichever our speaker likes. So welcome, Kathryn. Would you have a moment of the week you could share with us?
I do actually. It's not a professional one, but it was unexpected and very touching. So I managed to get across to see my brother, who lives on his own, and I try and visit him frequently. Anyway, when I walked in, I saw this lovely piece of artwork on the piano, and I said, "Oh, that's really nice. Has someone done that for you?" And he said, "I've done it for a very special person." And it said, "Those we love never leave us. They walk by us every day." And it had got a tree and just a beautiful picture at the back of it. And he had taken up cross stitch without me knowing and had done it for me.
Wow.
And so I was absolutely blown away by this. I mean, I love sewing.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that he'd taken up doing this, because he's nearly ready to retire himself. He's a head of maths.
Oh my goodness.
So it's not his. He's a scientist, if anything. So you can understand I was shocked and really touched by what he'd done.
And that does have special resonance. That's very special, isn't it? How lovely.
Yeah.
Gosh, how long did you think it took him to sew?
I suspect quite a long time. But I wouldn't have known he'd done it. It was just, I thought someone had done it for him because he's retiring from school. But no, it was for me. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I have to say, that's probably very much deserved, Kathryn.
Oh, well.
And what a lovely moment of the week to share. That's really lovely. It's a really family warm thing for us all. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Now, I'm just going to do a little bit about the maternity hour, and that's for the people who are joining us for the first time, as well as our regular people that come along every week. And I'll say another welcome to you all. If you didn't know about the Maternity and Midwifery Hour, we started at the beginning of the first pandemic lockdown in the UK. And really because we couldn't have study days, we couldn't have festivals, we couldn't have conferences, no face-to-face activity. And we all know how midwives and student midwives love face-to-face interaction and learning. And so we came up with the Maternity and Midwifery Hour because there was a real thirst for information, for connection, and for knowledge about, especially at that time of COVID. Now, of course, we've moved on to other things, but we've stayed. We've continued on because we seem to be a popular Wednesday choice. So we're going to carry on until you say no more, no more. And what's lovely is this is all free to access for everybody, wherever you are in the world. And I know we have mostly UK midwives and student midwives and doulas and some I know we have some mums and families and things, and some medics. But I know also we have a lot of people from all over the world. So I'm hoping if you say where you're from, Paul will let me know on this screen over here, and I'll turn to it now, where we've got our audience from this evening, because that's always interesting for me and the speakers, because we like to know where you're all from. Now, all these things are free, and they're perfect because everything we do is recorded, and you can access it from the lovely Matflix. And you can use that for your revalidation, for study. If you're doing an assignment, a project, whatever, you can just access it and update yourself. And I have to say, having gone through revalidation fairly recently, it's really useful resource because it's quite well, it's very informative and it's very easy to do and really interesting. I have to give you a health warning. It's a little bit addictive, and you might start off watching one thing and end up watching a lot more because you just get pulled in by our speakers, because we have some fab, as you will find out tonight, we have fab speakers. Now, I'm going to say thank you to all our midwives, all our students, our maternity care support workers, all the people in the maternity services who are carrying on, doing their best to do the best they can for women and babies and families. And people don't always say thank you. I think it's easier to complain when something goes not quite rightly, but I think it's important you know that you're important and you're appreciated. So you are, and thank you. Also, I want to remind you to look after yourselves, because if you don't look after yourself, it's much harder to look after other people. You get the empty pot idea. And because I get onto my lovely favourite calendar, my Meaningful May, this is from the Action from Happiness, and you'll know, anyone who's regularly watching the Maternity Hour know that I really like this, because you have a little thing to do every day. Not hard, but it just a moment to think about what you're doing and really spend for yourself. It's a mindfulness thing. Now today, and I know it's a wee bit late for be doing anything today, this was set yourself a kindness mission to help others today. So if you didn't do that today, you better do it tomorrow. But it's full of lovely things. Like tomorrow, what values are important to you? Find ways to use them today. This is on your resources sheet, so you can always access this. It's just, you can just get a PDF, nice and colourful. You put it on your fridge and you can just see what you should be doing, just to take yourself out of what you're doing. It does help, or it helps me. I like it anyway. So I'm going to almost seamlessly go into a very short news feature. We've got this week, happy birthday to the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE, in England. 25 years they've been going. I can't believe it's that long. I'd love to see the cake they've got, but instead they have published a document which is very interesting about how they came about and all about them. Again, that's on your resources sheet. Now, we're going to also remind you it was Skin Cancer Awareness Month, and there's some resources on our list to just check that sort of thing out. We need to be aware of it. Also, Preeclampsia Awareness Month, and their 2024 theme is Predict, Prevent, Prevail. And again, that's a really good website to get information. And just remind yourself, if you haven't seen anyone with preeclampsia or eclampsia recently, the things that you need to be aware of. We all need to know that. And also, what else is on? We've got the RCM resources, Strengthening Perinatal Mental Health. And I'll flash this up. There we are. Free to download. It's got the roadmap to the right support at the right time. And perinatal mental health is always important. And I know Kathryn is going to allude to it, because that's very close to her heart and really important. And of course, saying about the fact this is an RCM publication, of course, it's day one of the RCM conference. So greetings to friends and colleagues there. Thanks for all the tweets. I wasn't able to go this year, sadly. Hope to go next year. But life happens, doesn't it? And also, I'm just going to say that it was International Day of the Midwife on Sunday. And many of you will have been celebrating in your trusts or in your areas, wherever you are in the world, because it's a very special time for midwives. But of course, we're a bit greedy, aren't we, as midwives, and we want to stretch it out as long as we can. So we're having a bit of a focus on International Day of the Midwife tonight. I'm going to my branch tomorrow to give out little goodie bags, because I've been doing little goodie bags. So don't look at my office. It's a real mess, because I've been making little goodie bags. So we're doing our International Day of the Midwife tomorrow. You can carry on all the way till Sunday. Why not? Let's celebrate being midwives. Now, that's given us a good excuse to really focus on midwives. And I'm so delighted and honoured as always to be able to welcome Kathryn Gutteridge, lovely Dr. Kathryn Gutteridge, I must remember, Honorary Associate Professor, Psychotherapist, and she is, I always say that she's Luminary Midwife, because she shines her light. She's done so much in midwifery for us, and she's a very special person. And if you don't know, you need to have a look at her CV online, and she'll share, I know she'll share a little bit about what makes her tick. She's been a midwife, and that's not just a midwife, she's been a midwife, that's it. And she's been a consultant midwife, clinical leader, an innovative Serenity unit, and formerly president of the RCM, and also an honorary fellow now of the RCM. There's a lot more, but I don't want to say more time from Kathryn, because I love to listen to Kathryn speaking, and I know you will too. So welcome, Kathryn. Thank you so much for coming this evening. The screen is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure, and anyone that knows me knows that I love to talk about midwifery. So I can't say thank you enough. And of course, for this week, which is incredibly special, the celebration of International Day of the Midwife, which I always think is our chance to shout and to be heard about the work that we do and the good things that midwives can put really in their pocket and take all the plaudits and all of the well wishes that we deserve. And I still count myself as a midwife, even though I'm in retirement from clinical work. So I had to think about how I would talk to you this evening, and I had a flick back over the many presentations that I've done over the years, and this one called to me, and I'd done it for some student midwives who wanted to know what it was like to be a midwife, because they were very much on the cusp of registration, and how to overcome some of those difficult days and feelings, and not just that, some of the people that we will meet along our career pathway. So in the past, and I remember as a very small group of the very first Consultant Midwives Forum, that we talked about how we'd got to be where we were, which was taking on the role of consultant midwife back in 2002, 2003, and what it felt like. And I'd have to say it was pretty hostile at the start. 1 second. Is that moving? Yes, it looks like it. 1 second. Has that moved? Yes, right. Sorry about that. So I was thinking, probably all of you out there would have heard about the tall poppy phenomena, and I hadn't really looked into where it came from and why people alluded to tall poppies. So you probably know that poppies are associated anyway with the ravages of war, but the very first time that poppies appeared as a symbol of death and war was many centuries ago, which was around about the 12th century, when Genghis Khan was rampaging over the east. But more of us, I think, associate it with World War One, the fields in France where poppies just flooded every springtime and showed, if you like, a metaphoric symbol of how lives were lost but still remembered. So where did the tall poppy come in? Well, I remember driving back from a consultant midwives forum, and there were about 12 of us at the time in Leeds, and there was a field on the side of the motorway that was absolutely covered with poppies, and the next field was splattered with a few poppies, and the next field I saw just a few less. And that made me think about this. So when I got home, I looked up the tall poppy syndrome, and it came from a piece of work that was done in Canada. And it was done because of the difficulties that women were finding about how they progress through the workplace. Many of those women at the time, and this is 2018, believe it or not, I really struggle to think that we've come so little in terms of equality. But these women said that they felt that they'd been left out, ignored, silenced, despite them speaking out. And even though other women agreed with what they said, there were only a few that stood up and raised their voices. And that's where the issues around tall poppies comes in. It's almost like, yes, there are lots and lots of poppies, but actually the tall poppy standing on its own becomes the mouthpiece for the others. So that's where this came in. And I, you know, I think it has a great analogy there. So where are we at the moment? I don't want to talk about doom and gloom. That's not what I do, but I do want to take stock, if you like. And because I now don't work in the NHS, I have to work really hard to keep up with all the publications, and I have to work really hard to read things that, as you get older, become a little bit more difficult. And I'm not good at reading on the computer, so I have to print off things, and I sit and read them. So these are two pieces of my reading over the last, well, probably a year. And these two bits stuck out for me. The CQC, as we all know in healthcare, they do assessments and reports around the quality of care and how it's delivered within our NHS services. And their report in 21-22 really raised the issues about ongoing inequalities in maternity services, as well as training issues, culture. They put poor culture there, but in other places in the document, it's called toxic culture, and around risk assessments that aren't either done effectively or are absent. The other thing that I happened to read, and again, I didn't print it all off, was in the last 2017-19 publication of the maternal death rate and some of the issues around that. And Oxford recently published the 20-22 assessment of maternal death rates, and they actually found that those deaths had gone up, which didn't surprise me, because my first thought was, oh, well, it was COVID. But actually, they aggregated for COVID and they took those deaths out. So there is a significant rise in maternal deaths, and that was quite stark, I thought. And then recently there was a paper presented to the House of Lords, and I would urge you to have a look on their publication list on Hansard, because there are some really interesting conversations that are had. And there was a very long but also full discussion around the performance of maternity services in England in particular. So I listened to that, actually. You can, because they're all recorded. So that was something that I found that, again, they were aware of all of the things that we know and hope that are being dealt with. Then this is an old paper that I had read many years ago, as you can see, 2003. So this was when I just become a consultant midwife, and there was a select committee reading on Health Fourth Report, and this was around the safe staffing structure of maternity care. Now, this was, again, documented in Hansard, and you can find this paper if you wish. But what they said was the RCM had reported at the time, in 2002, they had 33,165 midwives in practice in England. Of those, more than 20% were over the age of 50. However, if you go onto that particular record, what they said is that in 1994, and again, I was a midwife then, that we actually had 35,000 midwives. So you could see that in, what's that, 8 years, over 2,000 midwives had left the profession. So that was showing a trend that I think was surprising. And they were asking the questions, well, why? So it was a mixed bag at the time, but I don't know whether you remember Professor Mavis Kirkham. She did a piece of work and did a report on why midwives leave. And in that report, she said one of the main issues was that they weren't working as they had trained to work, which was as a midwife, making independent decisions for women and advocating for them. So one of the recommendations from the House of Lords was that if women and midwives worked on a model of continuity of care, then that would be a welcome thing that women wanted, but also it would promote midwives, working as midwives and practicing in innovative ways. So continuity of care, etc. Also, they recommended that depleted midwifery establishment and closure of maternity units are not conducive to midwives coming back into the profession. There was a question around, well, what can we do to find out why people are leaving, but also to encourage them to either come back or to stay? And they looked at the models of training, and one of the models of training that has more or less all but disappeared is the registered nurse coming back to do her midwifery, which was a shortened course, and most of those courses were withdrawn. So that was another issue about the range of access to training as a midwife. And of course, now we're in a position where it's really really affecting midwives staying in the profession, continuing to work as they believe they should be working, but also encouraging newly qualified midwives, which we know were one of the most vulnerable groups to fall away from midwifery within the first couple of years. And this is where I think fear and recrimination and the culture of not having the resilience, and I hate that reference point, that someone isn't resilient to stay in a profession where they don't have access to a break or they can't make it out to the toilet. So fear and recrimination. What I also think is we have had plethora of reports, and if you, like I said, if you go on to any of the government and the NHS and NHS England websites, you'll see those reports. I also know that many midwives are afraid to speak up and speak out, because if they do, the media picks it up and report it in a way that negatively represents midwives. And there's something around we're expected to tolerate the intolerable. Now, I've just been listening. I'm a great audiobook listen when I'm doing my sewing. Many of you know that I love my time at my sewing machine, and I've just been listening to a book called Women, and this is the story of the nurses who went to the Vietnam War. There were 600 of those nurses, and although it took a long time for the US government to recognise the veterans that came back from Vietnam, the women were never remembered or referred to. And that was the story around how those women finally got recognition for what they contributed into succeeded in the war. But not only that, in those young men who either were blown to pieces or were brought to the camp where they were assessed and triaged and bandaged up. It was the job of those nurses to do that. But I also know that seeing bad things happen affects you. And there is this belief that there's nothing we can do about it. We just have to accept the status quo. So midwives are speaking out, and I would like to think that I'm one of them. There are lots of midwives on Instagram, and I do follow quite a few, and I do see them really positively promoting midwifery. This is one of the midwives, and I'm really involved with Ginny. She's an Irish midwife who has now set up in the Irish Republic the equivalent of birth rights that we have here in the UK. We think our system here is okay and good enough, but actually, and I've been across to Ireland and I've seen how the service works there, and midwives there are not allowed to work in a midwifery way. And Janine is one of those brave midwives who speaks up and speaks out. I just wanted to kind of put a few thoughts out there. And I want to say this, and I make no apologies for saying that, around normal birth, because there is a huge black hole, if you like, that normal birth has entered into. And I want to say it as it is. Now, I know the RCM did a huge piece of research on finding out what women preferred to call birth, And there's all sorts of names that it can be called: physiological birth, natural birth. But I grew up calling birth normal, and where birth didn't go along a normal trajectory, it told me then that there was other things that needed to happen. So I'm not apologizing for making this clear on my slide, but I think history will always show us where we've made mistakes, and letting the woman state her preferences will then give us guidance to what her birth, she prefers to call it. I think that we have had a show of senior leadership that has failed to address some of the issues. And I do still think that our midwife leaders have to be accountable and have to stand up as the tall poppies sometimes, because for too long midwives have either being knowingly blamed or inferred that they are the reason why something happened. And I will say that if you go back through the history of the NHS, health and well-being of mothers and their babies has never really featured highly. It's been the poor or the Cinderella of all services, and therefore financial recompense for maternity has never been addressed properly. I think we've had opinions from people who think that they understand midwifery and understand maternity, and that has informed debate and discussion. However, if you look globally, and remembering this is International Day of the Midwife, we are at a tipping point, I believe, in our profession, and it is really now up to us to encourage, promote, and really take our profession into the next generation. Otherwise, those who suffer will be the countries that have poor resources or no resources, and it will be because we have not taken care of our vital resources to look after midwifery in this country. So what next? We need to stand together, and I'm absolutely committed to this, that even though I'm not in the NHS now, I still feel that it's up to me to say what I believe about midwifery and to stand with those midwives who are working within the profession. We need to speak out. So if you are and have a burning desire around something that doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, speak out. Amanda Burley, who some of you may know, is an ex-midwife who has written a publication around bullying within our profession and our service, maternity services. And she recently presented that publication to the House of Lords, and she will be going back in a while to meet with them again to have another discussion. So sometimes you have to reach high, and I've supported Amanda, and I will continue to do that because she has been through a great deal, but has still stood up for what she believes in. Silence is not golden, and I've done a presentation on here before around that, so I'm not going to elaborate too much, but to keep something to yourself, it manifests. And if it manifests, it dictates how you feel and how you work. So I don't believe keeping silent is a healthy thing to do. And I think we have to stand up for our profession. Many of the midwives out there have done 3 hard years to qualify, at a cost to them, not just financially, but to their families. So if we don't stand up for that, then all of that time, all of that money is lost. Look at these lovely midwives here. These are the Yorkshire midwives that the TV did a wonderful programme around their home birth service. And so they believed in birth, believed in the team that they created, and believed in the women. And then when you saw the impact of that with the women and their families, it reached out to you from what you saw in front of you. They were within their own little network of a team. They were caring and sharing and lifting people up, giving others the chance to step off if they needed to. That's what good midwifery is. There's a dear friend of mine, Jackie, became a consultant midwife just after me, and I don't probably need to tell you where she is today. She is the chief midwife for the International Confederation of Midwives, and her impact and her reach is phenomenal. She has her arm there around Princess Catherine, and I know that she provided care for her. So birth, it really brings us right down to humanity, about who we are and standing together, owning our future and owning what is ours. We are midwives. We are by law the person who should be at the birth. No one else has that written into their mandate. So celebrate who we are. And I remember seeing Kate running across, I think they were in the Royal College of Obstetricians. Yes, we were. And Kate ran across to her and put her arms around her. That's what midwives do. We are never, ever forgotten. So one of the things I've always told myself that I must be and I must do is to advocate for women, whatever birth they wanted, even if they declined the whole system, I would still be there to offer something, to listen, and to be that voice for them. And I think that's a really important element of midwifery. Yeah, go the extra mile, but I never found that hard to do, because the women gave me much more back. And I put something on, I think it was Facebook, and many of the women that I used to be their midwife follow me on there. And I had some fantastic messages from those women and their families on what it meant to them to be part of this very, very precious relationship that we have with women. And one of them said, you know that you are an important part of our family to me. And I just thought it was 30 years ago when I was with her at the birth of her second child. And that's the words that she gave me. I thought that was so beautiful. Sometimes midwifery is hard. Sometimes it's terribly, terribly sad. And sometimes it's tragically traumatic. We have to state that, and we have to, yes, be there for the families that we care for, even when they walk home without their babies, but also for our colleagues when they are bearing the brunt of that and can't actually move forward. All we need to do is to mother them just as we've mothered that family. take time for yourself. And Sue said something about this right at the start, and I think it's important. If you don't nourish yourself, you can't give to others. So to me, that's one of the most important things that you can do. Be a good memory for that family. I remember when I first went to Sandwell and West Birmingham, and I set up the project to develop Serenity Birth Centre, and I called that project Your Birth in Our Home. And that really changed the way that midwives and obstetricians and anyone else that was working with us thinking about birth. Because when the culture becomes toxic, you are almost automated, not just in your moving, but in your thinking. And so the compassionate, empathic way that we work becomes robotic. And none of that is a good memory for families. Be a warrior for women and for womanhood. Looking at that baby when she's just given birth, it almost like pumps you up full of that oxytocin, full of the wonderful sense of achievement that woman has just overcome. So standing up for women, advocating them, but being a warrior sometimes, it's okay. And that doesn't mean that all of us choose to work in a birth centre, a home birth team, a continuity model. All our skills are vital, because we don't know when we need to reach out and accept help from other healthcare professionals. We know we work closely with obstetricians. We also work closely with anaesthetists. We also work closely with neonatologists. But there are a raft of other people that we need to be able to pull in so that we advocate for that woman. So I'm nearly at the end of my chat here, but my inspiration was Rosa Parks, amongst one of my inspired women. And she, as many of you will probably know, was known as the mother of the civil rights movement because of her action when there was the bus boycott in Montgomery. What happened was there were hardly any buses taking people to work, and she needed to work to provide for her children. And she got on a bus, and there were all white people at the front of the bus, and there were no seats at the back where black women or men were to sit. So she just in that moment thought, this has to stop now. So she sat down on that seat where a white person should have sat. And these are just some of her words, which I think are really inspiring. Have you ever been hurt and the place tries to heal a bit, and you just pull the scar off it, you pick it off over and over again? I knew someone had to take that first step, and I made up my mind not to move off that seat. I've learned over the years that when your mind is made up, this actually diminishes your fear, because you know what must be done to deal with the fear. And she wanted to be remembered as a person who wanted to be free, so other people could be free. This is a very, I did this talk to student midwives, so it's a very quick story here, but my first role as consultant midwife was with an alongside birth centre in a hospital where delivery suite, you turned right through the door, the birth centre, you turned left. So you were literally on the same corridor, but the end of the birth centre was theatres for the sections for the emergencies. And it was like a motorway. And one particular day we had 5 rooms, and our midwives were in those rooms with our women, delivering them of one-to-one care with a midwife, and they were doing fantastic, but I saw them going in and out of each other's rooms. I said, what on earth are you doing? And they said, we've only got one sonic aid. This was between all the 5 rooms. So I thought, this is unacceptable. So I rang the head of midwifery, and I said to her, I'm closing the birth centre as of now, because we don't have equipment that's sufficient to run this place safely. So you can imagine, she came running over to me, and she said, what's going on? You can't close the birth centre. And I said, if there was on delivery suite a lack of CTG monitors for women, then the obstetricians would close it now. I said, and there's no difference here. If a midwife needs a sonic aid with a mother in her labour and we're having to run in and out of rooms, that is unsafe. So all I need to say is within 3 hours, every single room had a sonic aid. So I'm going to end by saying, you are tall poppies. You might not think you are, but you are. I was, and I was frightened to speak out, and I was sometimes really angry with myself because I didn't speak out when I should have done. But you know what was more important was I cared about being a good midwife, and I cared what the women thought of me. I cared less what my colleagues thought of me, and that's a bit lonely sometimes. But I have done jobs where I felt that I could do better, and I know all of you out there will have felt that. So I know that pain, and I know what being criticised feels like. But to get a message from 30 years ago for the care that I've given, to say I'm part of that family, means more to me than anything I can say. So I'm asking you tonight, and as we celebrate midwives this week, to stand together, not just in this country, but across the world, because we know that midwives save lives, and women need us, whether they think they do or not. But I want to say to you, that is what being a midwife is. Being a good enough midwife is listening to what our women are asking of us. So I'll leave it there.
Fabulous, Kathryn. Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, since you're saying you're speaking to the world, and you are, because we've got some lovely midwives. Yes, you are. We've got midwives from Italy. We've got midwives from Bhutan, Uganda, Papua New Guinea, Ireland. And I need to say a special hello to Arwa Hadid in Qatar. So we're all over the place. So that's fantastic.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So thank you so much. Now, the questions have come through, a few comments. Now, those of you watching will know I have to turn around to my other screen, because that's where the questions come from. And I've got, I'll start off with a little comment first, which is Claire Winter. Claire Winter. Hello, Claire, again, Claire. And she says, you are so right, Kathryn. Midwifery is on the brink of disappearing. Well, we'll start off with the more negative, because it's in our hands, isn't it? It's in our hands. So that wasn't a question, but I have got a question now from Loredana Zordan. Hi, Loredana. And she says, after Brexit, did you notice a reduction of midwives coming to work in the UK from Europe? Do you think Brexit has made the situation of shortage of midwives even worse?
Sorry, Sue, I just missed the middle bit of that.
Okay. This is after Brexit. Did you notice a reduction of midwives coming to work in the UK from Europe? And do you think that Brexit has made the situation of shortage of midwives worse?
I know that because I was president of the Royal College of Midwives when some of those figures were being looked at. And yes, there were it was a really unsettled time because many midwives actually had come across and were working from European countries, were working here, and it was a free access, if you like. I do think it's made those midwives who are in our European neighbours countries more careful about how they travel across to Europe. So I don't think it's done our profession any good, but I think we have to find ways of overcoming that and making midwifery without barriers, because it's been done in the past and we can do it again.
I like that. Midwifery without barriers. Well, we are a big family, because one of the lovely things I love about midwifery, wherever you go, if you go to a conference or anything, you meet other midwives, you tend to know at least one person, and it is like a big family. So I like this. So midwifery without boundaries. Okay, thank you, Kathryn. I'm coming to now Diane Lockhart. Hi, Diane. And Diane says or asks, this is an incredibly important point. I did the old-fashioned training as a nurse and paediatric nurse. Now, this is when Kathryn was talking about in the other, a few years back, one of the biggest ways, in the old days, the biggest number of midwives came through into midwifery after they'd done nursing. The balance has changed completely now, but Diane says, and such changes happen, not always for good. I'd been a nurse for 10 years before I trained as a midwife, and it was so important. Now in Uganda, I run a midwife-led unit in a very resourced community. Wow. Well done, Dan. In 7 years, I've had over 2,000 births. We've had no deaths. Wow, that is simple, basic midwife, non-technical care with strict risk assessment and timely transfer. I've learnt more about midwifery in 8 years here than I have in a full career in Northern Ireland. Wow. What would you say to that, Kathryn? Wow.
I would advocate for that, because one of the things that I was really confident about when I developed the birth centre in City Hospital at Sandwell in Birmingham, that it should be a service that women can use, whatever their ethnicity, their diversity, etc. The most important thing was that they went into labour and they progressed, and we could see progress, and we would celebrate that. So good midwifery care, confident midwives with skills. And I would just say this, I think it's really important that when we close down these units, these midwifery units, that those skills are lost. And this is something that I'm hearing an awful lot from midwives who work in that way, because it's not just about what you see, it's what you feel and what the woman and that dynamic tells us. So I take my hat off to, is it Diane? Yeah. And she should publish some of that data.
Excellent. Well, Diane, this is your homework. Kept publishing some documents. Do an article. We'd love to see that. And come on Maternity Hour and have a talk to us. That would be even better. Thank you for that. Okay.
Wonderful.
I've got Diane Garland. Hi, Diane. And she said, I think words do matter. Normal birth today, because this is a huge, huge debate. And the trouble is, the media have got involved and people have these interpretations. And Kathryn pointed out that some people will bring different things when they don't have all the basics. So, I've just lost it now. Sorry, Diane. Normal birth today, with its massive interventions, is not how birth was when I qualified in 1983. I've been teaching physiological birth for many years and challenged colleagues to look after at interventions. The things most commonly now is the sweep for a natural induction of labour. So that, because that still is intervention, isn't it?
Of course it is, and it's about because you almost condition people to think that's normal when you work in that interventionist way. So it is subtlety that we forget sometimes is an intervention. Absolutely. And I know Diane. So.
Yes, we all know Diane. And it's lovely to see you know you're there, Diane. Fabulous. Now we've got Sharon Hadley. Now this is right, Kathryn. She says, Kathryn, you're so inspiring. We're so fortunate that we have you in the midwifery world. And she sent you a kiss as well. And a big hug.
Oh,
that's
bless
nice.
her.
And Belinda.
Do you know, can I just...
Belinda Ackerman, hello.
Oh, Belinda.
Yes, Belinda Ackerman is saying, well done, Kathryn. Wonderful talk. We're all inspired to be tall poppies. Thank you, Belinda. That's fabulous. And then Arwa Hadid, who spoke, who I said hello to, who's with us a lot of the weeks. Hi, Arwa, says, the Australian government has announced placement payments for midwives amongst other professions. Does this go far enough to retain midwifery students and midwives in the long run? And that's, I think, you're talking about like bursaries for students, which were cut for a while, which have come back, but they're tiny.
They're not, they're not a bursary to recompense people. They're a token, I think. That's the way I would view that. Yeah.
It's a bit like when we came.
Which is a shame because...
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah. It's a shame because if you're not valued there to do that, then what does that say about the role that we're expecting these women or men to do once they take that step into qualification? Yeah,
I think it reminds me on that, and thank you, Arva, for that kind of commenty question, because it reminds me of when because we're older people here. When we came into nursing and midwifery, it was very badly paid, but you were kind of that was part of the deal. But I think now people do expect better because you have to pay your bills and have a car
and rightly so, because I think the day of you're giving more than you're receiving back, it is gone. Yes, and I make no apologies for saying I'm a servant of women, with Mary Cronk in that field. However, we have different needs and different demands today, and it's only right that our midwives are paid proper recompense for the work they do and the responsibilities that they carry. Because as I said, Sue, we are the only individual that by statute has to be at a birth. And I think that's forgotten in the dialogue around the pay debate.
I think you're right. Thank you, Kathryn. Now we're just coming to the end of our questions, really. I've got one comment because this hour goes so quickly. But please, those of you watching, we will invite Kathryn back very soon because she's one of our favourite guests. Guess what? Because she always makes us think slightly differently, reminds us where we came from, where we need to go. So Sharon Hadley says, as a midwife, you leave your ego at the door and you advocate for the mothers you're caring for. And I always will be this midwife and stand tall always. Thank you so much, Kathryn. That's lovely. I think that's a fantastic comment to finish with. Unless you want to say one more thing, Kathryn.
No, I just again, I would just urge midwives to stand together and support their sisters. And I say that in the way that is around, let's see this profession be sustained and be there for women of the future.
Fabulous. Thank you, Kathryn. That's a lovely end piece. And the babies, of course. Can't forget those. That 30-year-old baby.
Yeah, of course. Oh, yeah.
That was lovely. Well, thank you so much. Now, I always say this hour goes the quickest of any hour in the whole week. And it's come to an end and I have to close it. But I'm going to say a big thank you to our lovely Kathryn. Always fantastic, always inspirational. I'm also going to thank Angela, who's behind the scenes, making sure everything's being recorded so you can catch up. You can show your friends this. You can have a, real inspirational hour with your chums, because it's all free. Remember, you just need to go to Matflix, and the address is on your resources. That's that. Also, thank you, Paul, for making sure all the questions and comments have come through to me, and I know he's been tippy-tapping very busily. And also, I'll remind you, the podcast will be available on 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday, and it'll all be available on Facebook anyway. Plus, of course, this will come out with next week's newsletter also. Now, we've got, don't forget to book for the Midlands Festival on the 14th of May, which is next week. So I hope to see many of you there that are here now. And also, I just need to highlight, there's a survey by Derma looking at hygiene, which you can all participate in. Look what's on the screen now. You just have to follow if you're good with those QR codes, and there are prizes. There are prizes, Amazon vouchers for those of you who have a go at it. So do go into that when you've got a mo. And in the meantime, I guess I'll leave you with that and just say another big thank you to Kathryn. We'll be here next week, same place, same time, and we'll see you then. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Take care.